Hi, this is Sarah. In this lecture, we will discuss high myopia and cataract surgery. The learning objectives of the present course are to learn about epidemiology and definition of high myopia, and to study the association of high myopia with cataract. We will also examine the preoperative, perioperative, and intraoperative risks. We will learn about the late complications of phacosurgery in high myopia, and finally, we will give examples of retinal pathology in high myopia and retinal pathology associated with cataract surgery. Concerning the definitions, when we are talking about high myopia, we refer to spherical equivalence of more than -6 diopters or an axial length of more than 26.5 millimeters. When we are talking about pathological myopia, we refer to a spherical equivalent of more than -8 diopters or an axial length of more than 32.5 millimeters. We have to keep in mind that high myopia affects 2% of the population and it's higher in the Asian population. We know from many studies, such as the Beaver Dam Eye study and the Blue Mountains Eye study, that there is a strong association between myopia and nuclear cataract. Posterior subcapsular cataract formation is strongly associated with high myopia and an onset before the age of 20. Additionally, from the Singapore Malay Eye study, we know that patients with high myopia may have a 3 to 5-fold increased risk of nuclear cataracts and a 30% increased risk of developing posterior subcapsular cataracts. When examining a patient with high myopia for cataract, we must be cautious, as many of these patients may have undergone excimer laser or other refractive surgeries. They may also have phakic intraocular lenses. A detailed medical history is essential to identify any retinal problems, thus, helping us give a good prognosis to the patient and the guide to which IOL formula to choose. A significant aspect to consider is managing the expectations of these patients. We need to have an extended consultation and discussion with our patients, setting realistic goals for those with high myopia. For example, if only one eye is undergoing surgery, we must discuss the possibility of anisometropia and the potential problems that may occur after surgery. In cases of bilateral surgery, we should inform patients about possible difficulties with near vision, which could lead to dissatisfaction and unhappy myopic patients. The option of monovision should also be discussed with these patients. If our patient has undergone prior refractive surgery, it is very essential to evaluate their prior refractive status and obtain prior records to avoid any possible refractive surprise. Additionally, we must always keep in mind that about 62% of myopic eyes have some degree of myopic or age-related retinal degeneration. The most common operative risks are the retinal detachment and the refractive surprise, meaning the variable postoperative refractive error which we could not anticipate. Regarding anesthesia, we must be aware that retrobulbar and peribulbar anesthesia carry the risk of globe perforation. Topical anesthesia is generally safer but may cause discomfort to the patient during the surgery. Keep in mind that a subtenons block can also be considered, as it does not carry the same risks as a retrobulbar injection. Phacosurgery in high myopia can be very challenging due to the increased depth of the anterior chamber. The surgeon may sometimes encounter a floppy and large capsular bag or zonular weakness in some cases. Intraoperative complications increase by 1.04-fold for each additional year of age, and complications increase by 1.22-fold for every 1 millimeter increase in the axial length. From many studies, we know that the incidence of posterior capsular tear ranges from 2.3 to 9.3% for an axial length of more than 27 millimeters. The incidence of anterior capsule tear ranges from 1.1 to 2% for an axial length of more than 30 millimeters. For the same axial length, the incidence of zonular dehiscence is 1.7%. The high myopic eyes are also at increased risk for anterior chamber depth fluctuations and the lens iris diaphragm retropulsion syndrome, characterized by 360 degrees of iridocapsular contact, leading to reverse pupillary block, pupil dilation, and pain. Usually, it is the zonular weakness that causes this condition. The American Academy of Ophthalmology recommends some techniques to minimize the complications. Try to have adequate pressurization of the anterior chamber using an OVD to prevent a capsule tear. Try to minimize the leakage from your incision and the repeated collapse of the anterior chamber, so you will prevent excessive movement of the iris and the vitreous. Decrease the irrigating bottle height and increase the flow rate to avoid the deepening of the anterior chamber. If you have lens iris diaphragm retropulsion syndrome, use a spatula, a cannula, or a hook to elevate the pupil margin, thus allowing the fluid to flow past the pupil. Concerning the late complications, we know that the risk of retinal detachment increases with the axial length. An axial length of more than 26 mm is associated with an up to 4% risk of retinal detachment. An axial length of more than 27 mm, 29 mm, and 33 to 35 mm is associated with a risk of retinal detachment of 6, 8, and 11%, respectively. For an axial length greater than 30 mm, retinal breaks have an incidence of 1.1%, and vitreous hemorrhage has an incidence of 1%. Refractive error is another potential complication. When a patient receives a negative power lens, the hyperopic error may appear to increase with axial length. This problem is probably due to poor fixation, or the presence of a posterior staphyloma. Refractive surprise is, unfortunately, common in high myopia due to challenges with length calculation and myopic degenerative changes. If the lens is inserted in the sulcus during the operation, it is more likely to be unstable or dysentered due to the large size of the sulcus. Clinically significant macular edema was found to have an incidence of 0.6% for axial length longer than 30 mm. Usually, the intraocular pressure decreases after cataract surgery. However, in highly myopic eyes, we have seen a lower speed of intraocular pressure reduction and unstable intraocular pressure in the first 30 days after the surgery. We have to examine the patients after cataract surgery for possible retinal tears and holes. If the other eye has a cataract too, timely surgery is important due to the possible anisometropia for the patient. We are going to show, now, an example of retinal pathology in high myopia, and another example of retinal pathology due to cataract surgery. In our first case, we have a 65-year-old female patient with age-related macular degeneration in the left eye, and 1 week of vision distortion. You can see the tessellated fundus, the myopic conus around the optic disc, parapapillary atrophy, and adjacent lacquer cracks. In the OCT, you may see hyperreflective tissue above the fovea. And in the angiogram, you may see a central leakage. In just 1 week time before the injection, a Fuchs spot has been formed. In the OCT prior to the injection, you can see the subretinal hyperreflective material and the presence of subretinal fluid. This is an active membrane due to high myopia. After the first injection, you can see that the RPE is covering the membrane. This is a sign of inactivity. Here, you can see the lacquer cracks in the fundus photos and angiogram in early and late phases. In September of 2017, the lesion was inactive. However, in October of 2019, there was a reactivation. You can see the fuzzy borders of the membrane and the lack of RPE cover. Another injection was administered, and in November of 2019, you can see that the lesion is inactive again. Bear in mind that, in myopic membranes, we only treat once. We do not give a loading dose regimen. We observe the patient after the first injection, and we treat again only if there is an active membrane. Patients with high myopia have already chorioretinal atrophy, which will increase if we inject with no activity. So, in cases like this, we inject only once, and then we observe the patient. Our second case is a 45-year-old male with a high myopia of -19 diopters. The patient had dark patches in his left central vision for 2 to 3 weeks after cataract surgery. Fundoscopy revealed a subretinal hemorrhage, but there was no evidence of an active membrane in the angiogram. In the OCT, you can see hyperreflective material above the macula, but you can also see an intact RPE. This is not a membrane but lacquer cracks due to cataract surgery. Of course, we do not inject, and the small hemorrhage will be absorbed on its own. 3 years later, the patient had new symptoms and there was a reactivation of the lacquer cracks. In the red-free pictures, you can see the presence of new lacquer crack formations that were associated with the cataract surgery. Again, we can see that the RPE is intact, so we just observe. The small hemorrhage will be absorbed on its own. The presence of the subretinal hyperreflective material was appeared due to the subretinal hemorrhage from cataract surgery and not due to an active membrane. The angiogram does not reveal a leakage, but just staining of the lacquer cracks. In conclusion, in high myopic eyes, we should examine the preoperative, perioperative, intraoperative risks, and late complications of cataract surgery. Specifically, postoperatively, we should take retinal breaks, clinically significant macular edema, posterior capsular opacification, intraocular pressure instability in early postoperative period, myopic choroidal neovascularization and subretinal hemorrhage due to lacquer cracks into consideration. On the next 2 slides, you can find a few references for further reading. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this presentation on high myopia and cataract surgery, and please don't forget to run the self-evaluation tests of the lecture.